Yumulundi, hello, welcome. I'm Sally Bulkeley. I'm Deputy Head of the National Security College and a proud Wiradjuri woman. And thank you for being here this afternoon. It's been 2 very big, long days of rich and diverse conversation that's taken place. I'd like to thank all the speakers and the moderators that have contributed over the last few days to a significant effort in providing contributions on Australians' perceptions of national security, security risk, preparedness and resilience. It's been fantastic to talk at the domestic level about the sorts of challenges that we're facing both today and tomorrow. But for today's session, we're going to take you broader and into the international dimension. And I'd like to welcome you to this session, Global Lessons, International Insights on Preparedness and Resilience. And for today's discussion, we will specifically examine the types of preparedness and resilience, elements, sentiments, actions, activities, initiatives that are working well, are in progress, or could do better in the nations of these wonderful and distinguished speakers that we have here today. We will learn insights from Singapore, Sweden, Finland, Japan and the US. And we're going to take this story from a local level to a regional to a national, and then we'll work our way through the global sphere as well. So I hope you come on the journey with us here. We did discuss what's happening in the Middle East this morning with Mr. Hastie and Mr. Patterson. We are going to conclude there on the Middle East agenda. We know that it's a hot topic, but we're very focused on preparedness and resilience today. And I hope that's of interest to you too, particularly when we get to Q&A. I'd like to introduce these wonderful speakers that we have here. The Honourable Jessica Tan Suneo, MP. Jessica Tan is a member of the Parliament for East Coast Group Representation Constituency since 2006 and is currently in her 5th term. She was appointed Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee in 2025, marking her 2nd tenure in this role. And from 2020 to 2025, she served as Deputy Speaker for the Singaporean Parliament. Ms Tan is also the Chairperson of the East Coast Town Council, overseeing management, maintenance and enhancement of public residential and commercial common areas. Lieutenant Colonel Jan Eldeblad is Sweden's Defence Attaché to Australia and New Zealand, and formerly led executive education at the Swedish Defence University, overseeing long-standing total defence training programs. Jan has driven major strategic education and wargaming initiatives, contributed to the Hunnel Holman, I hope I said that right, thank you, cooperation program, and worked extensively on lessons learned from Ukraine since 2012. Colonel Jussi Kosonen is Director of the Finnish National Defence Courses, responsible for national education on comprehensive security and resilience, following 3 decades of service across the Finnish Defence Forces. Jussi draws on leadership roles in special operations, international deployments, and doctoral research on knowledge-based decision-making in security ecosystems. Professor Narushiji Michi is Executive Vice President and Professor at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies in Japan, and a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Michi brings expertise in Japanese security policy and Korean Peninsular affairs, informed by senior roles in Japan's Ministry of Defence, Cabinet Secretariat, and leading research institutions. Finally, but not least, Dr. Charles Adell, a dear friend to the National Security College, and is a Senior Advisor and the inaugural Australian Chair at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, with prior academic and policy roles at the University of Sydney, the US Naval War College and the US State Department. Charles contributes experience in Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific as well, strategic policy, global fellowships and authorship on statecraft, grand strategy and historical responses to authoritarian regimes. If I could please pass a hand over to our speakers. So to take the thread of this panel further, focusing on local efforts, Jessica, your focus on community resilience at the local level is a really important lesson to Australia. And I think the audience would definitely be interested in hearing about your initiatives linked to community care and support and on societal resilience. One of the strongest findings that we found in the report is that Australians lack time, agency and clarity on what they do, particularly in a preparedness sense, and how they build resilience within communities. Singapore has invested heavily in building in community level resilience. And Jessica, you have built your own initiatives on the basis of that too. What has been most critical in making resilience real for citizens rather than just a government concept?
Well, first of all, a good afternoon to everyone. And Sally, I must say first a very big thank you to NSC for the privilege to join in this discussion on national security, preparedness and resilience. I hope you allow me, before I talk about our local and community initiatives, to give you the context of Singapore, because without that, it would be very hard to understand our community level initiatives. For those of you who are not familiar with Singapore, we are just a population of about 6 million people, and of that, about 3.6 million are Singaporeans, and then we have permanent residents, about 500,000, and the rest are people who work and live in Singapore. So we're a small population, but extremely diverse. The context I need to give you is that as a young country, we have a very diverse population, one that is rooted in our history. We were a colony, and because of that, and a very migrant population because of just where Singapore is located. And we have major races in Singapore. 74% of us are Chinese. We have about 14% Malays, and about 9 to 10% of Indians, and the others form the rest. And with that also, of course, a foreign population that lives in Singapore. But because of our history and because of what we've been through, it is at the heart of our resilience and preparedness initiatives really center on our national unity, national security preparedness, and we're very deliberate about it. So because our diversity is a strength for us, but at the same time, if it's not, it could also become a weakness if it's exploited. And it's very easily exploited given our location and our diversity. And when I talked about our history, a key factor that never leaves our minds is because of the migrant population, we had enclaves. We had enclaves of different communities. And when the tensions rose after our separation, we had the racial riots. And it was bad. And because of that, we made a very deliberate choice. Our forefathers and our current population, our current leadership, have made a very, very conscious decision that national unity was important, and how do we go about strengthening that and building that resilience. And so centered on that are 3 principles that we run on. The first is meritocracy, and that's enshrined in our Constitution, that no race, no population is one above the other, and everyone has an equal opportunity. Second is secularism, and this sounds extremely ironic because our third principle is multiculturalism. So let me tell you what we mean by secularism. Basically, as a secular state, we're not race or religion blind, but we are neutral. Because by doing that and being active in allowing for that approach, it gives safe spaces for people to then have their identity and their because we still believe that your race, your religion is still centered to who you are and your identity. So that's important, and that's part of your identity. But the first two, and as I said, is really centered on the national identity and the identity of individuals. So based on that, a lot of our legislation, policies, and community-led initiatives and support networks are then built on that. So just very quickly on our legislation, we do have legislation in place that sets the guardrails to allow people to be able to practice their religion or to be who they are and their cultures, celebrate their cultures without feeling threatened. And so we do have legislation in place, both for religion and race, to allow for the government to take specific actions, proactive actions to stop any hate content, incitement, and we can take very deliberate actions. Our legislation allows for us to do that, and I won't go into too much details unless at Q&A you want to understand more. But we also have a presidential council that looks and scrutinizes some of these decisions that are made, so that we ensure that there are safeguards as well. And at a people level, we have what we call a onepeople.sg, which focuses on research and surveys that we do regularly to get the pulses of the community, as well as to do dialogues, provide levels of dialogues and all that to allow people to have these conversations in a safe space. But with this in mind, the most important thing at the community level, and some of you may squirm at this, but at the policy level, we actually have something we call an ethnic integration policy, which at our public housing level, most of Singaporeans are homeowners, and 74 to 75% of Singaporeans live in public housing. And so our ethnic integration policy for public housing is that it has to mirror our population. So at a block level, we actually have a quota of what the racial mix should be. And this is to prevent enclaves from forming and to also mirror our population. It may sound alien to some of you, but it works for us. And why I say it works for us is because if you really want to build resilience and community resilience, you have to bring people together, not occasionally, not when you feel like you have an event, but really in the day-to-days. So people have to live together. People have to live in the same area. So that's how it's done. And that's what's worked for us. And so at that level, we do that in our schools as well. Our schools is a common shared experience, common platform for all our students. They all go through that same experience, and it's secular. So our education system is all in English. That's our education language. And there's also a bilingual system, which then allows you to take your mother tongue. So if I'm Chinese, I take Chinese if I choose to. I can also take Malay if I want to, or Tamil, but it's too difficult. I'm very bad with languages, so even Chinese I can't manage. But each of us has to take a second language. And so that keeps our cultural identity as well. And that allows us to do that. So the reason why I'm giving you this context is because then at the community level, because people are now living together, it's all about people. Policies, legislations are important, but it's about people coming together, and ultimately resilience, at the heart of resilience is trust. And if you live together, you have common spaces, safe common spaces for people to interact, to get to know each other, to build trust. That's how it's done. So at my level, as a member of parliament, at the grassroots level, I have many initiatives, both it could be celebrating of cultures, of activities that are cultural. It could be health related. It could be well-being related. My focus is also on physical spaces, creating physical spaces, but at the end of the day, about bringing people together. So I smile about this, but as I was preparing for this, 2 weeks ago, I had about 600 to 700 of my residents coming together, and we were celebrating the breakfast for Ramadan. And this is not 600 to 700 of only by of course the majority were Muslims, but we also had about 20 to 30% of Chinese and Indians joining us, plus other races joining us to break fast together with our Muslims. At the same time, just before I got to the plane to get into Canberra, I was walking with an organization that runs a special school in my constituency. That is, I was walking with a monk, and because this is a school run by Buddhists, but the students in the school are of all races. And so that's how it is. And it doesn't get built overnight. And at the same time, I'm supported by, we have harmony circles in Singapore across all our constituencies, formed by individuals who are from the different religious groups, They may not always be the leaders, as in, say, the pastor, but it could be a senior person in say, the church, or someone from the Buddhist Association, or the Taoists, or the Jain, or the Hindu. But as a group of them who support me, so that when there are tensions in my community, instead of me or someone else who may not understand, just going to help to kind of resolve the issue, I have the support of this community going to speak to them. And at the national level, we also have all our religious leaders. There is a formal council of them that come together, of 10 major religions in Singapore, that come together very regularly to also talk about some of these difficult issues. Because when things happen outside, we're a very small but open economy. So when things happen outside, it affects us. Our social diversity can also become fractures if we're not careful, because they can be exploited by external actors. So this then affects us. So therefore, those having the support of community networks, and it's not one-offs. These are built over the years. And these are something that we do at every level. So I would say that is how, at the community level, it helps us. I can share a lot more around community resilience, preparedness, things we do to prepare our community. But I think I'll wait for the question and answers so that I know exactly what you're interested to find out, so that we can talk about. I hope that
Thanks,
helps.
Jessica. I think I'd like to extend the conversation on national unity further. I think some of the concepts raised through our Australian engagement are: what do Australians want to protect? Values, freedom, connectedness, a sense of self at the community level. And I wanted to go to Jussi before, Jan, us taking our storytelling to the next level. You'll see there are themes that we see in Finland as well. I'd love to hear your perspective of how national unity is interplaying in the community resilience space.
Thanks. Good afternoon, all. Honored to be here. So I will start by stating bottom line up front, as was actually referred earlier today. Security is everybody's business in Finland, and I raised a couple of points why I say so. So Finland is located in far northeastern corner of Europe, NATO, European Union as well, next to Russia, 1,340 kilometers common border with Russia. And during our history, Russia has attacked Finland several times, and last time was during Second World War. And because of that national history and memory, we had a strong feeling 22 when Russia attacked Ukraine. That also caused Finland to seek for NATO membership, and a year after that occurred. So the national history and memory is important reminder that sense of urgency is present, maybe not on a daily basis, but very clearly in Finland. Because Finnish population is only 5.5 million, fairly vast landmass, Finland has relied on general conscription, and we still do. And besides training and producing wartime soldiers and troops, conscription has also important meaning in linking individuals within society and comprehensive security. And when young soldiers, young conscripts grow older, they will be having families. They will run companies. They will do different jobs within society, and they bring that personal experience and linkage with them in later on positions and jobs within society. Finland uses so-called comprehensive security model, which is a cooperative model bringing private, public, and NGOs and also citizens together among common security interests. So this cooperative model exists on a national level, regional level, but also in a local level. And it brings all the parts of society together in order to tackle whatever crisis we are facing. One element of comprehensive security approach is national defense courses. That's my position to run those courses. So 4 times a year we bring highly influential individuals from all parts of society, hearing the best possible experts coming from different sectors and sharing different perspectives within same class and same course. And by that shared understanding about different perspectives, they are much better equipped to tackle crises together after the course. Similar courses are also run in a regional level. Getting back to point, Sally, what you asked, according to recent poll, we conduct a yearly poll, 80% of Finnish population would be willing and ready to defend a nation with weapons, if necessarily, even though the outcome would be unsecure or uncertain. Also, another recent poll, actually from yesterday, provided insight that most trustworthy organization in Finland, according to citizens, was defense forces. The second one was the president of Republic, and the third one was police. And that is also, according to my understanding, part of security being everybody's business, because the institutions are what people rely on. In my opinion, every citizen should feel like a stakeholder of society, having an ownership on common things and also common security. And that is probably the most important thing, that every individual needs to feel that they belong to society, which is worth defending for.
Thanks, Jussi. I'd like to get back to how Finland eventuated to the state of where trust, transparency is favourable within those Finland polls, and how Finland as a community were able to look at security as a responsibility across the whole nation. But before we do, I would like to ask Jan a question around the Swedish context. I think Sweden and Australia are quite similar in their level of social licence. And when I say a social licence, I mean social buy-in or social permission. When it comes to security, I think we still have a way to go when it concerns permission for security. But also Sweden operates on a federated state similar to us as well. And yesterday we had heard the perceptions and notions across all tiers of government on the struggles associated with coordination, particularly when it comes to preparedness or gathering community resilience and sending sources of messages across to communities in ways that are helpful. Jan, key findings for us is that people support resiliency in principle, but they don't feel clear on what it means for them personally. And Sweden has taken visible steps like public guidance and preparedness campaigns. How do you make preparedness and resilience concrete and actionable?
Okay. Firstly, I would say these are my favorite topics as well, working with concrete stuff and actionable. But firstly, thanks for having us here, I will say. It's a good way to sharing the knowledge. It's always a key for success. But I normally say that don't copy the concepts, but maybe copy the principles. Also good to read that report. That was very, very interesting, I would say. And also see in the report that you have been engaged within the society. It's also key for success. So that's maybe bring me to share one of the stories, because I was working at the Defense University before. Among many things, I was responsible for the lessons learned Ukraine, as you were mentioning. And during 2024, we were running all around Ukraine, interviewing a lot of people just to find out their lessons learned. And we're asking some of the common questions to all of the people. Within your knowledge today, that's 2024, what should you have done differently 2014 and 2022? And I would say most of the people responded the same way. Sense of urgency. And we should have started earlier. Bring that with me, definitely. I think I'll raise two things within this short introduction. The first thing will be education as a driving engine to build resilience. And the second one will be to create a momentum in that resilience building. And as you saw in my bio, or you could see, Sweden have conducted this total defense education since 1952, so it's a very long time. But we'll try to adapt to what our conditions is, and because of our situation, we need really to review our work within the concepts and the education as well. So we need to be more agile, more modern, and much more faster in many, many ways. So that means that we need also to change the methods. We can't just continue to educate the same way as we have done before. And normally, as a military teacher, if I'm bringing that hat on, I'll say that education could be done in two steps. First one is to understand what's going on and why. And that could be used from a decision-making perspectives in the problem framing. But due to the conditions that we are having, we need to go for the solutions. So problem, solutions, and then what questions. And that means that you need to have more advanced pedagogical methods, I would say. Simulations, tabletop exercises, wargaming is my favorite. And one of the examples that I can share with you when we have to speed up, there was a task that we received from the Defense University to increase the cooperation between Sweden and Finland. We have been working as brother-in-arms in the military for a long, long time, but we need to increase the cooperation from a crisis preparedness perspective. So then we handpicked the 10 most important people in the Swedish system and the equal in Finland. Bring them together, sharing knowledge, sharing concerns, sharing the network, and I pushed them pretty hard because we need to come up with solutions as well. And during the course, they actually come up with solutions. And that was amazing to see. And I'm happy to share that concept. And maybe there could be something for Australia and New Zealand. I don't know. To finally, because I think it's a combination of top-down and bottom-up, we have a national security strategy, and connected to that one, our Supreme Commander and the Commander for the Civil Defense together, they developed guidance for the whole society, for the whole total defense. And it was included as well 7 case situations, not scenarios, but case situations that should help the actors in our system to go for solutions. If you're looking at from the bottom-up perspective instead, maybe you have heard about these famous pamphlets in case of crisis or war, which is pretty famous. That was a way to educate our population, but also give them the guidance on how to survive the next coming 7 days and further on. And I realized when I'm conducting briefs here in Australia about the Swedish total defense concept, and I'm explaining about this pamphlet, more or less all Australians are saying that, it can't be done here. Then we are scaring the people. But I'm saying, to counter that question as well, okay, but at the same time you're saying that the situation is deteriorating. So how much more should it deteriorate before you're passing the tipping point and you develop your pamphlets? Could be something to think about. And I think it's when you're trying to combine this top-down and bottom-up and go for more, I would say, solutions, then you're going for this momentum in building the resilience. And I think it's a little bit easier as well to define what is the things that we actually could prepare and pre-plan, there more content in that development. And there are things that you can't, that must be more agile and more, I would say, modern as well. And I will say that the decision-making process, that's definitely a kind of skill that you need to train for. So to end up, I will quote my Minister of Civil Defense when he supported this pamphlet and this top-down guidance as well. And he was actually facing to the whole Swedish population and saying, 1, read the manual, following the instructions. 2, don't delay your work within your preparedness. And 3, this is for real. Act now, not later.
Thank you, Jan. I think the top-down, bottom-up approach is wonderful and something that we can explore here in Australia, but also considering preparedness education at the community level. And I know the microphone should be going that way, but we're going to bring it back here for a minute to Jessica. Jessica, we would love to hear your perspective of what Singapore is doing to provide preparedness guidance at that community level and the education that comes with it. And then we'll go to Jussi.
Actually, when I was listening to Jan, I will tell you we have exactly the same thing. It's called SG Secure, or SG stands for Singapore. SG Secure, and this was launched in 2016 because of just the wave of terrorism that was happening in our region and crisis management, and our people were scared. They didn't know what to do. It wasn't so much about knowing what was happening, but not knowing what to do. So we did exactly this. Besides the pamphlet, we use technology as well. We have an app as well, but we train people. Very simple steps. How to stay alert, what to observe, what to do in terms of when you see something that doesn't feel right, and we had scenarios. We brought the community at the grassroots level all together. This was nationwide, all communities, we did it. And because we didn't want a situation where our people didn't know what to do. And simple first aid as well. And actually we had pamphlets and we have first responder training and all that. But I was going to pick it up and say maybe we can refine ours with yours. But the other thing that we had to do, and this is something about we had to move on as refine. I think that's the other point that I would like to stress, because we've just refreshed our SG Secure, because the increasing threat for us now is radicalization. And so now helping our people understand how to spot signs of radicalization, and then what to do, how to help people who were at the risk of being radicalized. And it doesn't always mean the hand of the law, but really how does community come together to help with rehabilitation. So these are some of the things. I mean, that's a lot of detail. I won't go into that, but I would say that it is doable. But of course, Singapore is small, so it's easier. But if you do it at the community by community level, because that's how we did it, and we did tabletop exercises too, at the community level, not at the defense level. But the civil defense was really good. They came and helped us as well.
Thank you, Jessica. So I think the underlying theme there is in preparedness guidance, top-down, bottom-up approach, simple, concise, targeted, and at the community level, which is wonderful. And if we can move on to Jussi, and no doubt Jussi will have a perspective on preparedness guidance as well. But Jussi, I just wanted to go back to that social permission, social buy-in again, which Finland does so well. Our reports showed that Australians are increasingly concerned on security threats. That's been amplified over the last few days in our discussions, but many feel disengaged or unsure of how to contribute. Finland is often seen as having strong public buy-in for national security. How do you build this sense of shared responsibility, community? How do you also work that with your neighbouring nations as well? Thanks.
Yes, I already touched upon that question during my previous talk, but I would like to underline importance of personal level interaction that happens to many parts as conscription that touches more than 1 million Finnish citizens in a personal level, but it also reflects on larger society. We also have used so-called 72-hour program, and we've encouraged people to make sure that they will be okay, even if electricity will be cut or there will be some supply chain problems or things like that. I think people value information, so we shouldn't be too scared of scaring people. Awareness is much better than confusion, and people will anyway get the information somewhere. It's better to have it in official way and thought out way. I would also like to raise a point concerning organizations. So it's not only about national level government and individuals. So all the organizations should also feel responsible for playing their part within society, feeling responsibility over common security and supplies as well. So that's what we try to enhance also during our courses. But also important factor or organizer is National Emergency Supply Agency, responsible for enabling network of critical organizations, critical companies who are actually responsible for supply chains, and by facilitating information sharing and also common planning, common exercises, wargaming, that enables organizations to identify their role better and also take responsibility over larger good, if you will.
Thank you. Yossi, really appreciate your insights there on the more regional perspective of how you bring that social buy-in, but also how you collaborate with your partners in nearby areas, which brings us to Mishi. Thank you for your patience while we've been working through those threads. I'd like to take a different dimension on this conversation and work our way into the military posture within the theatre that Japan is situated within. So you do have Korea, Japan and the Philippines in this very heightened threat environment at the moment. And of course, there are threats coming from the Korean Peninsula. There are threats coming from the South China Sea in some respects. I'd like to probably acknowledge that there are others around there as well. And we have hybrid threats happening, lots of coercion. Mishi, there's a lot going on, and I'm sure you've had a lot to research over the last few years. We'd really like to understand your perspective from a Japanese context or Japan's context. How do you prepare and maintain resilience for your nation from a military perspective, and how do you also work within your region to keep resilient as well?
Right, great. Sally, thank you very much. I'll talk about foreign military threats. So this NSC report says this. 55% of Australians considered a foreign military attack unlikely, and only 5% say it is almost certain. But at the same time, 36% of them rated the foreign military attacks as catastrophic, substantially more than any other threats. So I think Australians have to better understand what kind of foreign military threat that we face and how we might be able to respond to them. And if you would like to do so, you should come to Japan, because being in Japan, you'll be within the range of Russian, North Korean, and Chinese nuclear missiles. And at the same plus, because of weak Japanese yen, you'll be able to enjoy shopping and skiing. That would be perfect. Why not? This is the perfect time for you to do so. All right, so some people say that Japanese security policy is changing. It is changing. In what way? What's new? Japan is getting committed to the defense of Taiwan. That's new. And also, in order to understand what we are up to, together with Americans and other friends, regional partners, we have to understand the nature of the US-Japan alliance. Some people think that the US-Japan alliance is there to defend Japan, but that's not true. The most important objectives of the US-Japan alliance are to defend South Korea and Taiwan. They face much more dire threat than Japan or the United States do. And so what would be the roles that Japan will be playing if there is a war? Let me focus on China or Taiwan today. What would be Japan's roles when there is a conflict across the Taiwan Strait? There are two roles that Japan will be playing. One is to allow the US forces to use its bases or their bases in Japan. There are several big main operating bases, US bases in Japan. Unless the United States can use those forces, US will not be able to fight major wars on the Korean Peninsula or across the Taiwan Strait. That's one. Second role that Japan would be playing if the Prime Minister can make a decision to commit her forces. Good to be able to say if she decides so. Japan will be able to commit its armed forces called self-defense forces to fight for the defense of Taiwan together with the US partners. Okay, so that's a great news because US commitment and the Japanese increasing commitment will certainly enhance the credibility of deterrence against Taiwan. It's a good news for us, but sort of bad news for China, right? So the Chinese leaders don't like what we are doing, right? And as a result, China is trying its best to prevent Japan from getting committed and playing the roles that we are getting prepared for. What is China doing to prevent Japan from doing or helping Taiwan? China has acquired 600 nuclear weapons. China has deployed 1,300 ballistic missiles capable of reaching Japan. And also China seems to be developing low-yield, more usable nuclear weapons. And also Chinese leaders understand what Japan is doing. In May 2024, Chinese ambassador to Japan, Mr. Wu Jianhao, made an interesting remark in his meeting with some Japanese politicians. He said, I sort of paraphrase, if Japan interferes with China's internal affairs, which is Taiwan, the Japanese people would be dragged into the fire. Wow. He's a professional diplomat. He speaks perfect Japanese, but he was not too diplomatic when he said this, right? And also, somebody in China produced this interesting 4-minute video with an interesting title. It's on YouTube, so if you are interested, you can watch it. The title of that video is CCP, which is a Chinese Communist Party. CCP vows to nuke Japan continuously until it surrenders unconditionally for the second time. What does it say? It says, again, the same thing. If Japan interferes with China's internal affairs, China has an interesting principle, non-first use of nuclear weapons. China has pledged, at least publicly, it would not use nuclear weapons unless somebody else used nuclear weapons against China. But this video says, let's make Japan an exception to this principle, and we should be willing to use nuclear weapons against Japan if Japan interferes with Taiwan issue. And interestingly, they understand the situation. It says By the way, Japan is the only country which suffered nuclear attacks. So Japanese people are most vulnerable to military or nuclear coercion or attacks, which is right? And so they understand the situation and they're trying to use it. And also it says, noted the fact that, oh, by the way, it was the United States which dropped nuclear bombs on Japan. And so this is what is happening already. And so China is trying to use military coercion to prevent Japan from, playing its roles in the defense of Taiwan. So, finally, we have to respond to it. And Japan has been doing three things to, deal with Chinese coercion. One, Japan has deployed missile defense systems. We have deployed two different missile defense systems. One is a sea-based upper tier exo-atmospheric system called SM-3. And the other one is land-based endo-atmospheric lower tier system called Patriot Pac-3. We have spent about 30 billion Australian dollars. That's a lot of money. Second thing that we have been doing is to conduct civil defense exercises. The Japanese parliament enacted the civil defense law in 2004, and based on that, the Japanese government started to organize civil defense exercises locally, not nationwide, but in 2017. And in fiscal year 2023, we had 43 civil defense exercises in different parts of Japan. And in fiscal year 2024, we had 28 exercises. And these civil defense exercises are important for two reasons. One, we will be able to minimize casualties and damages in case of war. Two, that would enhance psychological defense, because if people don't know what to do if somebody threatened us with weapons, missiles, it would be likely that they would we would give in to military coercion. If people understand what to do, how to respond to protect themselves, the likelihood of them giving in to military coercion will be much lower. So that's a good thing. Finally, we talked to the American friends and talk about how to enhance the credibility of the extended nuclear deterrence that the United States provides to Japan. It's a nuclear umbrella. And so we sit together, Japanese officials and American officials sit together twice a year in what's called EDD, Extended Deterrence Dialogue. And we talk about different scenarios. We talk about how to enhance the credibility of the U.S. extended nuclear deterrence. Thank you very much.
Mishi, thank you so much for your insights there. It's really interesting to hear what the threat environment looks like. It's very harrowing. I mean, I love the idea of shopping in Japan and going to Glow Lab and going to House of Ghibli. It's all very exciting things to do. But it is quite terrifying at the same time to hear how that threat environment is operating, but also the resultant civilian requirement for national defence or national preparedness and the mindset shift that's taking place there. So I hope those of you that are in the audience listening on Michi, he's offered us a compelling story here of the raw nature of what the dynamics look like in that area and how a nation responds. So thank you, Michi. And that leads nicely into Charles as an observer of global dynamics at the moment, as someone that specialises in looking at geopolitics, looking at concurrent nature of all the tensions that are following at the moment, even the emergence of what's happened in the Middle East and whatnot. We're very lucky to have you because you've also been observing Australia and the alliance and what has been happening here within Australia's context. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the report and your observations of Australia to date and how that connects in with preparedness and resilience.
Absolutely. So first of all, just thank you for the invitation. Congratulations to NSC, to ANU. It's a fascinating report. And third, it's a fascinating report. So as a longtime observer of Australia and of the U.S.-Australian alliance, I thought I might do three things that answer and get at your question, Sally. Tell you, as an American, what I found most fascinating in your observations about yourself. Some conclusions that I think you can very easily pull out of this report, and then maybe finally some questions that are clearly left unresolved by the report itself. So first, what's fascinating, or maybe what's not so fascinating we should start with. Overwhelmingly, men are more confident than women in how much we know about national security. Shocker. Second point, I say in ACT, that those residents of ACT are confident in their knowledge of national security, far exceeding all other parts of Australia, combined with the fact that ACT residents overall are less concerned about the threat environment and think the nation needs to do less than other parts of the country. Interesting. Third, the title of the report, No Worries, with or without a question mark behind it. The she'll be right mentality is clearly discordant with how the majority of Australians think about their own personal, institutional, and national security settings at this point. And that's borne out really by the figures. I was really struck by that 62% of Australians who think that the government ought to be doing more at this critical juncture. And then finally, it's not a number so much as one of the anecdotes, or maybe it was just a boldface headline that you had in the report, that Australians find themselves confident in their resilience communally to take things on, but much less confident in what the nation's capabilities and preparedness look like at this point. So I think, at least from my perspective, leads me to several conclusions that I draw out of this right away. First of all, clearly, most Australians want more information from the government on what is happening. They want more discussion of national security. They want more capabilities, somewhat undefined what those capabilities are. And then, in general, there is a desire for both a more vocal and proactive approach by the government. Again, we all read the same report. This is what I drew out of it. But I think those conclusions, and in the discussion today, last night, and yesterday, there are a couple of unresolved tensions here that I think are worth kind of noodling on and worrying forward. So the first, let's return to that ACT statistic. Who's right? Those who live in ACT, the mandarins of foreign policy, or the nation? If it's those who actually have their hand on the wheel and are decision makers and are the explainers, the politicians of this, and the general public is wrong to be so alarmed, then clearly this begs a question about communication strategy. If, however, the nation is correct, this begs a different question about a totally revamped set of security settings, which leads us to another unresolved question. When people are asked what they want lots of things, and clearly they want security. But are they willing to pay for it? And again, to me, this is an unresolved tension that's woven through our conversations. More capabilities, yes, please, but who's on the hook for paying for it? Third point here is in a more uncertain global environment. You were just talking about this regionally, but it's clearly true throughout the world. Are Australians, again, we're painting with a very large brushstroke here, but are Australians willing to take on and assume more risk? And what exactly does that risk look like? And what does it mean? Final point here I would bring up is it is clear coming out of this report, coming out of the discussion yesterday, clearly, you heard this from Chrissy Barrett. I think she really underscored this point. There's a clear desire to have a bigger, more robust, more open, more frank public discussion. We also heard last night from the Home Affairs Minister that there's a clear need to lower the temperature, to stop the polarization, particularly in the context of radicalization, but I think we can say that writ large, a need to not hyperventilate but lower the temperature. And I think the question here is, how does one sit with the other? That is, how can you have a more open conversation while you're attempting to lower the temperature at the same time? And I think I just might conclude, if you don't mind, by a quick story that a couple of years ago wrote a report with an Australian friend about the future of U.S.-Australian cooperation in an era of great power competition. Just to be clear and frank, which I think everyone has told us to do, great power competition here clearly just means China. We released the report at APH. A couple secretaries were there. 24 MPs were there, listening, questioning, probing. And I'm sharing this story because I still can't get out of my head and don't have a good enough answer yet for the final question that we got. So a newly elected MP stood up. I forget their name, and I really forget their name. I'm not just saying that. Who said, "I'm buying what you're selling. A more contested environment means more is expected of Australia within the alliance and from the U.S. within the alliance. How do I talk about this? How do I talk about this?" Jessica, at some point I'm going to ask you for your reflections because we're not politicians. You are the politician up here. But I'll give you my quick response at the time. One, I ducked and weaved and didn't answer the question. I said, I have the wrong accent. You shouldn't be asking me. Obviously, you shouldn't be asking me. You should ask Australians. But I would say there are two necessary ingredients to begin that conversation. The first is we can have an honest conversation without hyperventilating. I think our publics are mature enough for that in the US and in Australia. China is not a pipsqueak. They don't fall over. They have immense capabilities, which are already causing immense challenges to many of us. But they're not 10,000 feet tall. They don't always get their way. They are not incapable of being deterred. We can have a mature conversation with our publics. And I think it's incumbent upon political leaders to do so because, second point, if we don't have that persistent conversation with what the challenges that we actually face are, how can you ever expect your public to, one, support over the long term what is a very expensive endeavor? And two, how can you ever expect your publics to buy that what you are doing is an attempt to stabilize as opposed to inflame the situation? That is, when we are doing things that we have not done in the past because we feel that the security environment has shifted away from us, if you are not explaining that, then everything that Australia does, that the United States does, that Japan does, that Finland does, that Sweden does, looks like a provocation, as opposed to necessary actions to regain agency in a much more contested world.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'm going to do something rather unconventional here on a panel. Raise your hand if you are ready for the conversation after the last 2 days. So how many of you feel ready to have that conversation? Well, look at that, success. So I think we can already start this conversation within our local communities, as Jessica has provided us with some guidance, nationwide, as we've heard from Europe as well. From a regional context, maybe not as acute or sensitive as Japan right now, but Charles raises some really good points here. And I think the narrative doesn't only come from Canberra, as you mentioned before, who are already confident about national security, although can I also tell you that the local Bungendore pub is as well, as I've witnessed. There is also a conversation that can be had nationwide as well. Audience, thank you for joining us on that journey through local to national to regional to global, even to the Bungendore pub at some point. Really appreciate your time. Could you please welcome me in offering a hand to our wonderful speakers?